Okay, we'd like to welcome everybody to our weekly meeting of the Greater Hartford African American Alliance. And we are taking opportunity to share a conversation that we are having with several of the candidates running this year over the last couple of weeks and for the next 2 weeks. And so we welcome the public who are joining us. And as part of our meeting, part of the President's Report, we're doing our Voices of the Community. This morning, we're going to be joined by two special guests. Our first one is Mary Sanders. She is running for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 1st District, and she is joining us now. So, Mary, welcome aboard. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and we thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're running, what your vision is, and after that, I'll open the floor up to our membership to ask questions that you may have. Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate everyone's time and willingness to interview some of the minor party candidates as we are left out of the larger discussions. For example, there was a debate for the first congressional race, and I was not allowed to participate as a minor party who didn't do sufficient fundraising to pass the threshold for the League of Women Voters. So about myself, I'm born and raised in New Britain, and I've been living in Hartford for almost 30 years. Moved here in the 90s, and have always lived in the South End. Right now I'm on Preston Street. I was on Standish Street for a long time. So my two youngest children grew up in Hartford. I went to South Middle School and when I first moved here, and then went on to Capital Community College and college after that. My background is one of social services. I worked in nonprofits all my life, except for 3 years in the New Britain school system as a school secretary. But I've always worked primarily around meeting basic needs and workforce development. I was at the YWCA in New Britain for 9 years and created a lot of training programs. I finished off my career 20 years at the Spanish-speaking Center of New Britain, running a very busy food pantry, adult education classes, workforce training, helping people start business. We've had a lot of partnerships with the colleges and other entities to bring training to our participants, not only Spanish speaking, but anyone who wanted to open a small business, primarily focused on minority entrepreneurs. So since I moved to Hartford, I've been a little bit involved in the political scene. I ran for Hartford City Council a few years ago, and I ran for state rep 2 years ago against John Fonfara. These past couple years, I've gotten more involved in national committees and paying attention more to national politics. And I decided to join the Green Party 6 years ago. Totally frustrated with both major parties about the direction we were headed in, and realizing that, I hate to use the word false choice, it's kind of a cliche, but with the two major parties, I have a lot of concerns about, they're not addressing the needs of the communities. They are not concerned about climate change as they need to be. And we spend way too much money on war and domination. So I'm a peace activist. I've been an activist for probably 30, 40 years, out on the street protesting one thing or another. And I think that's probably, I have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. And when people ask me why I'm running, I say because I want my 8 grandchildren to have a better world. I want them to have a planet with livable air, water, green spaces, and we don't seem to be headed in that direction. Less and less of that is happening. And also with the military, I am really concerned about all the weapons we're sending to all these countries around the world. I think we should be focused on humanitarian aid and development versus war. So I will leave the rest of the time for questions, and happy to answer anything that you want to throw at me.
All right. the floor is open for questions from our members. Um, you raise your hand or jump right in there with the uh, with the first question.
Hi, Mary. I'm in the car, but
You are muted. We can't hear you.
Can you still hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. The priorities that you see going to should you win would be your top 3 priorities.
Could you
really
repeat that, because we you were breaking up.
What are your top 3 priorities? What do you see as the major issues that need to be addressed as in Congress, as a congressperson?
Well, I mean, there are so many issues to address, but I think the most pressing, I mean, people are experiencing all kind of problems. The Green Party is advocating for universal health care for everyone. They call it Medicare for all now. So obviously our health system needs to be overhauled. But none of those other things matter if we don't have a livable planet, or if we are on the point of nuclear war. We're building new nuclear weapons. We're sending weapons to everyone around the world. So I would say my first 2 priorities would be downsizing the military budget and encouraging diplomatic relations with countries versus adversarial ones, and addressing the climate crisis. Because if those 2 things are not addressed immediately, nothing else matters. Making sure people have their basic needs met would be my 3rd priority. Making sure people have affordable and accessible housing, making sure people have adequate health care, making sure people have access to good schools. It's not fair the way schools are funded now. I know that's a state issue, but I think there needs to be more direction at the federal level. There needs to be a lot of things happening at the federal level as far as updating guidelines around, the Food and Drug Administration, the FCC. All these departments are operating under guidelines that many of them were written in the 90s, and they're not realistic for today's needs. So I would say there needs to be, more accountability at the federal level. There's so much waste and fraud and duplication that, I mean, I always say that I'm a social progressive or social liberal, but a fiscal moderate, because I would never ask anyone to pay more taxes with all the waste, fraud, and duplication that's going. I know if I had a lot of money, I sure as heck wouldn't want it to go to those areas. So there needs to be a lot more oversight. I think with the 2 major parties and the way elections are and campaigns are run, it's all about fear mongering. So that kind of forces us to choose the lesser of 2 evils. Because I don't really see a lot of difference between the 2 major parties in a lot of the issues. It's all money driven and aggressive, and they are not really listening to folks in the communities and finding out what their needs are. So I would demand more accountability, more accessibility to our elected leaders' ears. They need to be around not only during political campaigns, but all year. They need to be out there with the communities and really see what's going on. Our elected officials' offices are all filled with millionaires, and we need to get money out of politics. We need to get some people in there that really understand struggles. I grew up in the projects in Newport and worked in nonprofits all my life, so I don't have a lot of money now. I'm struggling like everyone else. So we need to make sure people's basic needs are met, especially people that are aging. They talk about the Social Security system. They say, oh, if you vote for the Republicans, they're going to cut that. That's not going to happen. I mean, that goes with the fear mongering, and they do that to keep us from focusing on the larger, overlooming issues of climate change, war and aggression and imperialism, and the fact that they are not taking care of the needs of the people. So I would say those are areas I would want to concentrate on.
Are there any other questions from membership for our guest this morning?
I would have one, Mr. Chair.
You have the floor, Colin.
Good morning, and happy to see you coming to the African American Alliance. My question is going to be based on construction, and a lot of people who get in politics right now is not actually understanding the situation with Black and brown contractors in the state of Connecticut. And I would just hope that somebody like yourself would actually focus on that a little bit to make sure that we do get an opportunity from what the state's saying that we're supposed to get, especially DOT, just all the federal dollars that come through the state of Connecticut, where there's minority participation, but we're actually being left out.
I appreciate that question. And before I even thought of running for office, 10 years ago, when I was involved in Occupy Hartford, some of us would go down and stand in front of the MDC building with the minority contractors and advocate for people to get a piece of that pie. There was so much money coming into MDC then. I imagine it's the same now. And I knew about minority set-asides. Coming up through the nonprofits and being in a leadership position and seeking grants and stuff like that, I knew that there were opportunities for minority contractors. And when I started to hear all the stories about just, people just being thrown a few crumbs, but all the big bucks going to, the traditional contractors that were out there for years, that were well connected, that had money attached to their names, and then on top of that, some of the shoddy work that's done. I'm always complaining about that. The people coming out and repairing the roads and sidewalks, and then they have to be done a year later because they're falling apart. I think it's a never-ending cycle with some people. But I definitely would be concerned about that, and I would try to bring the minority contractors to the table to actually talk about their experiences and make sure that they have every opportunity to apply for those grants, and also to apply for money for capacity building, because there are all kind of pools of money out there that people haven't been able to tap into, and I would definitely advocate for that.
Thank you. And also too, the state has just hired a firm to do a disparity study in the state of Connecticut. And in this disparity study, none of the quasi agencies are going to be a part of this this study. So UConn, I think CD, CREC, just all those quasi agencies where all the state dollars are going to are not. They told us that last week that they're not going to be a part. Those agencies won't be a part of the study. So I'm not sure on what are they going to actually study if those agencies are not in there.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually heard about that, to be honest. So I would have to do some research on that. But it doesn't make sense, because if everyone's not at the table and everybody doesn't end up on the same page, people could talk to their blue in their face, in around those meetings. But if the people who are actually controlling the dollars are not going to be accountable for how those dollars are spent, it's wasted time. So I encourage you, to find out about that. I will. Do you know who is putting this together?
Actually, I think CHRO is involved in it too, but I'm not quite sure who was the lead person on that. And also
well,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll be happy to put my contact information in the chat before we finish. So if you want to send me more information on that, because I'm kind of known for raising hell about stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I think I was with you the day when we did the march at MDC. So I was one of the leading person on that. Okay,
I remember I came out of there with a nice yellow T-shirt that you guys were passing out to all the marchers. I mean, I was probably down there, half a dozen or a dozen times through those weeks, but I was encouraged that people were actually out there taking a stand, and it was getting a lot of attention because it was right on Main Street.
Okay, and also too, in the study, I'm just going to say it, there is not an LGBTQ if I'm saying the initials wrong or whatever, but there is not a certification in the state of Connecticut for that group, but they're now in the study. So I'm not sure if how is it that you don't have a certification, but they're going to be involved in the study, and if that does go through, how do you identify a person that is gay or not? I mean, just how do you certify that person, and how do you prove that that person is that? Because this is just another way of just separating the group and just just blithely just piling the I would say just having these groups together just makes it smaller for Black and brown contractors, and
it kind of waters down the effect
yes,
of the intended effect.
Yeah, so you're basically watering it down. And to me, if a lady is that way or whatever it is, she is still part of the woman-owned business. And if it's a male, the male is still going to be a part of the $20 million small business. So for them to try to lump that in the group, which you already certify, no matter how you want to put it, you still have a certification. So why try to get the group, in this thing to just water this thing down?
Yeah, I understand trying to be inclusive, and it's called for in certain situations. But unless that group has a particular, business association or a construction, some kind of association of professionals that belong to that group, I don't really see where it's appropriate in this particular case. But I would need more information because, like you said, some people might fall into different categories. Of course, the white males that fall into that category might feel left out of some of the other groups, right? So I understand your point, and I would want to know more information about that.
Definitely, thank you.
Because I do appreciate people's intention to be inclusive, and if it's coming out of CHRO, I mean they've been dealing with all these issues for so many years, and they may be afraid to be challenged from a particular group if they're not included.
Mm-hmm.
So I would need more details, yeah. But I appreciate your concern on that because it does water down the pool even more. And you guys have been fighting for so long.
Yep. And that's the disturbing part about this disparity study, that we've been fighting so long. But again, like I said, all these quasi agencies are going to be out of this study, and which to me, that's wrong. We need to look at the whole number. And another thing too, they're only going back 5 years. So the years that we were out there marching, we had more Black and brown contractor at that time, but they all went out. A lot of them went out of business. So this study, if you only went back 5 years, you're not actually going to see how they destroyed Black and brown contractors.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any others? We still have about 6 minutes left before we're joined by our 11:30 guest. So we still have some time for questions for our guest. The floor is open.
If there are no questions, I can talk about some of the other things I've been involved in.
That'll be fine. The floor is yours.
Well, I've been a member of the New Britain NAACP since the 80s. And I remember getting involved in different things with them, going out and looking at police brutality and lack of accountability in policing in Bristol to start with. And then I started seeing the patterns, and I started realizing what was going on. So, I mean, I've been out there on the streets at Wethersfield Police Department, Bristol Police Department, New Britain Police Department, Hartford Police Department. And this is another area, criminal justice reform that I've been involved in. Probably 10 or 11 years ago, I got involved with going up to the Capitol and wrote some draft legislation around the Alvin Penn Racial Profiling Act. I was pulled into that by a couple other activists that were working on it, and we met with Glenn Cassis over at the African American Affairs Commission and looked at how the Alvin Penn Racial Profiling Act wasn't being, there was no accountability and oversight regarding that law, because the law was on the books, but it wasn't being enforced. There was a law that said that police officers needed to write a particular report when they stopped drivers, and it was not being done. And the police departments around the state were probably 75% of them out of compliance. And when the group started meeting and we started trying to figure out what was going on with that, we made a bunch of recommendations. And one of the recommendations that I submitted 5 recommendations, and one of them was to establish the Racial Profiling Advisory Board, which I was happy to see happen 2 years later. And that's been functioning now out of CCSU, Central Connecticut State University, where I went. They seem to be doing a fair job at reporting the inequities and the disparities in traffic stops. More work needs to be done around that, but that's one of the things that I feel I had a part in making be successful. Some of the other recommendations were around, not asking other passengers in the car, for example, for their ID, as long as they were not involved in any kind of criminal activity. I'm just talking about routine traffic stops, because there were a lot of stuff going on around immigrant rights too at that time. So we were trying to make sure that people just didn't get pulled over for no reason, their cars searched, and people deported that were just really not doing anything, no kind of crimes. So that's one thing I am very concerned about, criminal justice reform. Past couple of years, I was involved in the Stop Solitary movement, and happily was happy to see that law was changed, or some of the laws were changed around solitary confinement, because people coming out of the prison system, I worked with them for 35 years in social services, trying to help them rebuild their lives, and some of the stuff they went through in the prisons, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I'm not saying people don't need to go to jail and pay for their transgressions, but it needs to be rehabilitative and not just punishment, because they need to come out and reintegrate into society and hopefully find jobs and become productive members of society. So criminal justice reform is a big thing. And I remember being up there time after time, petitioning Eric Coleman and Gary Holder Winfield, and just trying to get some changes within that system and others. Another thing is welfare reform. I was involved in a study when Connecticut did the 5-year limit on benefits to single parents. And Connecticut has one of the most regressive welfare reform laws in the state. In the nation. The national limit is 5 years to get assistance, but Connecticut whittled that down to a year and a half, and if you're lucky, another 6 months or another year extension. But there needs to be more education and training going on during that time. It's really hard for people on public assistance to pull themselves up out of that, because the supports are not in place. And it was all privatized. It was taken away from the Department of Social Services, which I think did a better job than some of the nonprofits. When I talk about accountability and waste and fraud in the government that I would like to see reined in, it's also happening in too many nonprofits. The nonprofit industrial system is also just as bad. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of oversight. Not to say that some of the programs they're running aren't good, but there's just so many layers of administration money going on in many places, and you have places calling themselves nonprofits where the directors are making $500,000, and frontline workers are making 12 and 13. That's my issue. We need to take care of frontline workers, and get rid of all this waste and duplication up at the top. So in
Okay.
case there's any last questions, I'll wrap up with that.
All right. How can people get in touch with you and or support you if they so choose? Is there is a contact website, email? How can people reach you?
Right. Yeah, I've not done any fundraising. The a zero budget campaign. My email address, I think I should probably put it in the chat quickly. That'd be easy
Okay.
for people. I do have a political Facebook page if you want to see more about my extreme politics. It's Mary L. Sanders in the House. Mary L. Sanders in the House. And I'm going to jump off camera and put my email address in the chat. Again, I thank you all for your time, and I hope to hear from some of you regarding some of these issues that we spoke about this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Okay. We will move on next to our 11:30 guest who will be joining us now. Elijah El-Hajj-Bey. He's a petitioning candidate. I hope I pronounced your name right. And he's a petitioning candidate in the 5th District for state rep here in Connecticut. And so we want to welcome him to the Greater Hartford African American Alliance. Good morning, sir, and welcome to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're running, what your vision is, and then we'll open the floor to our membership for you to take some questions. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Elijah El-Hajj-Bey. Retired employee of the city of Hartford, division manager in the facilities department. I was responsible for all the city properties, parks, police department, city hall, flood control, street lighting. My mission is to bring us together. Okay, I've been doing this for 30 years behind the scenes, and never once have I taken credit for anything that I have done trying to unite us as people. It's not that I want to run, it's like I have to run, because who we have in power now is not representing us, and they've been misleading us, lying to us. So we're focused on trying to bring us together as a group of people, not just Black and brown, but everybody that's included in the 5th District.
Okay. Are there any questions for our guest this morning from the membership?
Brother Elijah.
Good morning.
How you doing? How you doing? This is Colin. You left out that you was a contractor too, brother.
Yes.
As far as what we know in construction and just and what you're seeing going on with the disparity study, what do you think that you could do to help to change the way that they're looking to exclude like UConn and certain entity out of the disparity study?
One is I'm not only just a contractor, I'm one of the best. In every project that I have been on, I have always tried to bring every other contractor on. I have always vocal on how the contracts have been administrated. They always tell me that I'm the only one that's qualified to do this work, which is not true. So I tell all of us, we need to come together and demand the 30% that is required by law. We have to make sure that we look at contracts and understand contract language. We can't just say that we're going to get $1 million contract and only getting a check. So we, as minority contractors, need to come together and stop letting them use each other against each other. That's my focus. That's my mention. You have always known me to be out there in forefront and speak up when these matters have always transpired.
Yes, sir. Got you. And the question was, what will you be able to do, or what would you try and do with this disparity study that's out, that it's not going to be fair for Black and brown contractors? If you're, when you do get into that position, what can you do to help change that? And what is your
One,
thought about it?
we're going to stop using these studies and not using solutions. We always study. They've been saying they've been doing studies that's been mandated for 5 years. So I have been a part of 5 studies. And how long does it take to study that say that you're not administering contracts? Let's stop playing these games. Let's stop taking the payoffs. Let's if we solve that solution and demand the state of Connecticut and the governor to enforce it. And that's what we need. We don't need no more studies. We need enforcement. Laws are already on the books. How many laws do you have to keep writing to say that these minority contractors are not getting these contracts? You keep saying to put the best effort forward. That's a lie, and it's been a lie from day one. And we need to stop that. Just for instance, the Hilton hotel contract came out, and they said, this is what we're going to set aside for minority contractors. And when I called them, none of that stuff is factual. It's like, well, we don't have any information. So why are you sending out RFPs and RFQs if you don't have it already set in place? When you saying that the deadline to apply for certain contracts is this day, and when you ask the question, they have no information. We'll get back to you. So that's the best effort that they put forward, is by saying to you, we gonna solicit you to get contract, and you as well. Okay, you sat on a committee with the school board committee. You knew the contract wasn't right at Buckley High School, but no one spoke up when I was speaking up. So I can't keep being the only one on the front line taking the bullets and everybody's hiding behind me. You got to come up in the front line and speak up and tell the truth.
Okay. Are there any other questions for our visiting candidate running for state representative in the 5th district? And the floor is open to the membership for questions, whatever questions you may have.
So, everybody know that I have been out there on the front line for 30 years. And I have never taken not $1 that I have not earned myself. I was a part of $556 million in contract, and they were all fronting. And when I went to the city and say, hey, this compliance is not happening. I went to the state, this compliance is not happening. I went to the school board committee, this compliance is not happening. What is going on? But I'm the only one that seemed to be speaking up, speaking out for everyone. And everyone know that I have never taken a penny that I haven't earned.
Well, I have a question relative to contracting. It seems as though enforcement is the major issue. And what kind of legislation would you consider or propose be done at the state level to make sure that construction, oversight and enforcement is put into place in municipalities, particularly here in Hartford and Windsor, Bloomfield area?
Well, I can tell you this, in just one term, one term. I'm not a politician, and I don't apologize for what I say and do. Just one term, I guarantee you that I can uncover $1 billion in waste, because one, I was a part of that system that does not work. So all you have to do is take out that one word, best effort, and make sure that you comply. Now, New Haven Housing Authority has been doing this for 30 years. How come it hasn't done it in Hartford? I went down to New Haven Housing Authority in 2007, and they have one of the best contract languages that ever been written, where it guarantees that the person or whoever the contractor is on that contract, one, he is the person. Two, he makes sure that he gets paid before the general contractor get paid. So that's the enforcement that you need. You have to make sure that these contracts are in compliance, and the compliance officers who they hire are in their pockets. So you cannot be an enforcer and be a partner in a partnership or a citizenship with the contractor who you're supposed to be enforcing.
Well, that seems reasonable. It seems as though the main issue here, without sounding redundant, is the enforcement. Now, so you mentioned in New Haven, where they have very good contract language. It's worked for 30 years. There seems to be a level of intentionality in New Haven to make sure that citizens and contractors from the New Haven area and minority contractors get what is actually set aside. And it seems that though there might be a hope in, since we live here in the Greater Hartford area, where you're going to be representing, it would seem that in this area there is no intention to make sure the contractors' needs are met, and that the individuals who are charged with construction and get handing out the contracts actually do the job. So you mentioned best effort. So when the deals are cut or whatever the case is on the part of the municipality, there's a clause in there that says to try your best to do. That means like you don't have to really try at all. That's how I would understand that.
Well, when I was 22 years old, and I carried this city on my back by myself. Not one person who came forward to say, "Hey, this man is telling the truth. He's speaking up for us. We are a group. We are united." Everybody ran for cover, saying, "Oh, well, I have a family too. I can't be involved in that." But you put me up there. I was a child doing man's work. I did it successfully by myself because I stand by my truth. I will die by my truth. I'm not here to just get a paycheck. I'm not here to just try to get recognition. I have not received one recognition in 30 years. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows me. I don't boast and brag. I try to unite us, because that is my greatest revenge, is uniting us together. And I said, when the police killed my nephew, my greatest revenge is bringing us together. And I have done that. And I've been sitting back for 30 years because it was told that in order for you, Elijah, to be successful, you're not going to compromise. You're going to make sure that things are done. So what you need to do is raise your family, make you some money, and if the time comes, then you go and run. That was a 30-year plan. I'm in that position. I am not asking anyone for $1. All I'm asking you to do is vote. And I'm saying you make sure you hold the leaders accountable. If you don't vote for me, you make sure the person you vote for do the same thing that I'm telling you to do. Hold him accountable. Run him out of town if they don't. You can come picket my line, my lawn, and say, "Hey, you a liar. You a thief. You a crook." And if I'm telling you to do that, then you do that to other people as well. Stop letting them give you a $10 check and they putting $1 million in their pocket. Now, and I heard $269 million spent in the north end of Hartford alone. Where is that happening at? Where's the money at? I see Park Street been developed. How do Park Street come before Albany and Maine? It don't make sense. Because, the San Juan Center has been very vocal, and everybody know what they're about. They're about their neighborhood. They are the real ones who've been running Clay Hill, Clay Arsenal. We have been silent, and it got to start speaking up. If you don't start speaking up, they're going to come in. I'm telling you, if you lose Hartford, you lose it, you're never going to get it back. I seen this playing 30 years ago, and I said, what was that? Because I did not recognize it. And they were just like, well, that's the development of Hartford. I lived in Bellevue Square, so I knew what Bellevue Square was on the map. That don't look like Bellevue Square to me. And now, when they saying, oh, we about to tear Bellevue Square down, then everything has come to forefront. And I'm telling you, you're not prepared for what's about to come, because the last flooding that you received in Hartford was just a snowflake compared to a storm. I ran flood control. I protected flood control. And that was not what they call climate change. That was deliberate, because they dismantled that department to get rid of me.
Okay, we have a question from Naisha. You have the floor.
Hello, Elijah. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm in my car. You mentioned not taking a dime or raising money. Do you feel that you are running a competitive campaign?
No, the people who are running has been put up there for other people and other entities. Like Miriam Khan, I trusted her. I believed in her when she stood up there and saying that she is the first Muslim lady, and what that means is bringing integrity to the forefront. I have given her information about the judicial system, which is corrupt. Okay, so when you come back to me, and I said to her, all I need you to do is ask two questions. One is what this constituent is saying is true, and two, what do he need to do? I fought Windsor Federal Savings for 11 years, okay? They saying that, oh, he owed us $25,000. I didn't owe them $25,000. They tried to steal $200,000 off the contract that off the loan that I received, okay? And they took $1.5 million of what they call a pre-remedy judgment, meaning that we're gonna hold this money until the suit is finalized, and then we will release everything else. Okay, so you only could hold $25,000 for $25,000. How do you take $1.5 million? It don't make sense. It don't make logic. Okay, and because you had corrupt judges behind it. So I speak up and I speak out about this. And if it's happening to me, I know it's happening to you.
Elijah, that's a great, all great points, and the passion is there for why you're running. But what is your strategy to win?
My strategy to win is just come to you and tell you the truth and tell you what's going on, how we can come together. We got to save the youth. We can't keep running out here saying this is a wild child. That wild child is one of us. So we got to bring in our youth. We got to come together, the West Indian community, the Black community, the Puerto Rican community. We can't keep going on different fronts. We have to come together as one and start demanding. We can't start negotiating in different corners. There's 4 corners in the contract. Those 4 corners have to come together as one.
Angela, you have the floor.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. El-Hajj-Bey. Just a quick question with the recent redistricting of the 5th district. I was wondering what your priorities are as it relates to North Hartford versus Windsor versus South Windsor, and where should we expect, should you be elected, your efforts would be placed?
The redistricting was done deliberately to exclude the North End of Hartford. And that was done by, and intentionally done by Leo Canty. He was the Democratic Town Committee in Windsor. He had his own agenda, own mission. When I went to the Democratic Town Committee in Windsor 30 years ago and say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm a part of, he told me directly, you're not the candidate for us because you're focusing on North Hartford. No, I'm focused on my people and my neighborhood. If I live in Windsor, how it's been redistricted, that's my neighborhood. So everything in that is going to be represented. It ain't going to be no color lines. It's going to be, I'm going to make this the premier district in Connecticut as example for each and every other city to follow.
Do you have a follow-up, Angela?
No, thank you for that.
Okay. We have a few more minutes left. If you would like to, give people information as to how they can get in touch with you, where they can find you, contact information, and any closing call to action. The floor is yours.
My best contact information is Reliable Mechanical Contractors. And that my phone number is 860-752-4218. Office number is 860-683-2959. My email address is Reliable Mechanical Contractors, all one word with an S, @gmail.com. What I envision and what I'm hoping is that we just stop putting the same people in office over and over and over again that have not made progress. We should start focusing on term limits. One thing that's bad in the Black community is the leadership don't know how to lead. They are lifelong heads of these organizations. They have to start developing everyone. Everyone has to be a leader. Everyone has to be a part. Everyone has to feel like that they matter, not just a Black Lives Matter, that they matter because they're putting themselves on the line. You out here marching, you out here protesting, but only one person is benefiting, the whole group. And like I have always told the Minority Construction Council, I don't care if you have $1 million and you have 100 contractors. 100 contractors should get a piece of that action. So all contracts should be written for all trades, not just one, not just the person who's ahead of the agency, but the painters, the electricians, the carpenters, the sheetrockers. Everybody should have a piece of it. That's how you make progress.
Okay. Our guest for this second half hour has been Elijah El-Hajj-Bey. He's a petitioning candidate for the state representative in the 5th District, who has joined us for the last half hour. And you heard the information that you need in order to reach out to him. So we thank you, sir, for joining us. We thank our guests earlier for joining us as well, Mary Sanders. And want to remind everybody that Election Day is the 8th of November. And go to the polls. Make sure you cast your vote accordingly. We thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us this morning. And
thank you.
We will see you all next time.